competencies.
Institutional competencies.
So
okay.
we have, in our discussion, your presentation, we've heard about all different segments of law, libel, liability, tort. The list goes on. There's probably 10 different things I heard in the last hour that are all segments of law.
Yep.
Do we have lawmakers and procedures competent to address all of this?
Great question.
Or are we better led through these standard-setting leadership activities out of the market?
That's a great question. So this is definitely not a question I get when I'm like talking to my employees. The employees think it's like there's the law, right? And like it's like the law, and then they know the difference in like JavaScript and Ajax and like CSS and HTML and all this other stuff that would sound like nonsense here. But yeah, there are different kinds of law, tort and privacy law, contract. I would say, I don't know. I don't think I'm even qualified to answer that question intelligently. I think I'm qualified to say that the market is providing some solutions. I don't ever think that the market, when it comes to very deeply personal stuff about people, can be the only solution. But whether the changes come from the edges incrementally from FTC and other regulatory agencies or through a nip and tuck kind of legislation around say healthcare data or medical data to really prevent some of the kinds of more difficult scenarios that I was envisioning, I think that's sort of my prognosis as to what will probably happen. So maybe that answers your question. Maybe if I'm legally trained, I clerked. And also, I do technology for the last 14 years. Maybe that and I still don't have a sense of expertise. There are other people who are more expert in this room than I am. But if maybe that answers the question, maybe that implies that there is no kind of one person or one set of people who would have a comprehensive solution. I'm just thinking it through out loud. Is that responsive?
Very helpful.
Okay, very helpful. Great.
So, what steps do you take to know that you're dealing with the person you're dealing with? So instead, it could be a competitor or it could be a ex-husband or a brother-in-law who's out to get your reputation. What steps does your company take?
Credit cards.
All credit cards.
Yeah. So
that's it.
Well, credit cards. So it's like this. It's like so there is legislation on this topic. When you have a credit card match to the order, when the identity of the credit card purchaser matches the identity of the person we're working for, then that's good enough for us. In order to defeat that, you'd have to have stolen someone else's credit card. When a credit card is entered with a name that does not match the customer we're supposed to be serving, the flag is thrown up, an exception is thrown up in the system, and we investigate. Usually, we just kick them out of the system. Sometimes it's a parent looking out for a kid with a different name, and so we have to find a way to verify that, and there are usually pretty quick ways to verify that. But that's one of the reasons we use credit cards. Yes?
What about the legitimate bad guy who wants to hide the bad stuff about it? People are accusing someone of molesting kids, of doing...
So we do not serve anyone who has been even accused of a child abuse or of what we call a notorious felony. So that
what if I just rip people off? What if there are a lot of complaints against the guy at the newsstand? Do you just assume that people have the right to not have negative stuff out there?
It's a great question. It's also again the heuristic question that very smart, sort of legally oriented people ask, because we always ask about the hard cases. I was worried about this when I started the company. It turns out to be like less than 1/10 of 1% of the cases that come across the transom. And we do have a little committee that sort of reviews kind of stories, right? So if you were 17 and you had an infraction of a very minor kind, and you're now 37, and we might assist you. But we have a kind of review process where we try to make the best judgments we can. It happens very rarely, but it does happen. And our default is usually to kick them out of the system. Usually, give them a refund. It happens. You have tough cases on occasion. Yes, ma'am.
Mistaken identities. Like several of my friends had the exact same name. Mistaken identities where you have the exact same name. A lot of actually similar profiling type stuff, like game programmer, living in a certain area. All these sort of things that you would think uniquely identified, and they needed a way to disambiguate.
How do you so? Is the question, how do we disambiguate our customers from people who share their same names, the John Smith kind of problem, or what the NSA calls the 27 Mohammeds problem? Is that the question? I love that question. So that's part of the. Thank you for asking that question. That's part of I think the cool IP of our business. We have spent an enormous amount of time on a problem that we call persona isolation, which is intended to isolate our John Smith or our Mohammed from the others who might be out there in the world. And we have a competitive advantage in that question because when a customer signs up, he or she is putting up his or her hand and saying, hi, this is me, and I am the trombonist. I'm not the flautist. I am the soccer aficionado, and I don't like cheese, right? So they're giving us data points around the fences that allow us to disambiguate. And doing that in an automated way is an exceptionally hard math problem. It's an exceptionally awesome problem. We've made a lot of progress. It's not perfect, but I'd say we are ahead of the state of the art in that field, and partly because we have more information about our customers than say a Spock would or any of those kind of people search engines would. And then to answer your other question, how do I disambiguate myself from the other people who share my name? Was that the other question? So, okay, I am the trombonist. I'm not the flautist, and I want people to see my page versus other people's page. I want them to see me, not the others. Then, I just hope that. So we solve this problem a lot. We just get the trombonist at the top. So far, we have never had a case in which the trombonist and flautist both signed up. I'm worried about that day. What will we do when that happens? I don't know yet. Because I don't want to be defeating ourselves or each other. One of my board members asked me that question because he's a very famous, he's very well known in a certain community as a strong atheist. Forgive me. He's like a very sort of pronounced atheist, one of our board members. And the other guy who shares his name is a Baptist preacher. And he doesn't want to be confused with a Baptist preacher. So we've been asked that question. I don't have a good answer yet. No.
How much of it is people trying to escape their past, youthful, drunken Facebook pictures, and how much is current workplace scandals or DUIs or contemporary?
It's a great question. I think it's a great question. I think that's one of the cases in which we're asking the wrong question. So again, the question is, if I'm worried about my online, your implied question, I think, was, if I'm worried about my online reputation, I must have a problem, right? And that's false. That's not true. The vast majority of our consumers do and should be people who don't have a problem yet and are trying to get in front of a problem and promote themselves, establish themselves, and protect themselves prophylactically. So that's the vast majority of our cases. In terms of the people who do have a problem, and some of them do have a stain, it's usually put there by somebody else. Not always. People who 5-10 years ago either participated in a forum that they didn't think would be public and is now public. One of the biggest listservs in the world, let me tell you how real this is. One of the biggest listservs in the world was purchased by one of the big search engines about 10 years ago. And, millions of conversations that took place over a decade, millions of conversations were now immediately searchable by name. I mean, about very personal stuff. Disease, alcoholism, everything, right? And so if you didn't expect that to be public one day, and now it's public, then you might want to move beyond that. And that is a case. Sometimes it's a stupid photo. They say, oh, I did that. That was me. Sometimes it's more innocuous. It's, my girlfriend and I we had a photo on the beach 4 years ago, and it's a very nice picture. And now she's married to somebody else, and I'm married to somebody else. And we're all happy, but that's the second photo that you see for my name. Can we somehow remove that or get past that? And that's the kind of thing. That's it. Some of it's controversial, or some of it's more innocuous. But most of it is just people looking out for themselves because they know that others are looking at them on the internet proactively. Yes, sir.
Question about the removal of photos, because you just brought that up. Kind of give you a hypothetical based on a real-world example. I'm a staffer for a legislator in a state, and I've taken pride that I've never been caught on film with a glass of alcohol in my hand. But one day, someone catches me at a party, and I've got a glass of wine in my hand. I convince my boss to introduce a bill that forces or gives me the ability to request a takedown of a photo from popular social networking websites or elsewhere. And but do I need that? Can your service actually help me get that photo down, or would you need that piece of legislation